Hi, in this video, we are going to see how to use ribbon for doing load balancing. So I have the Eureka server, and let's assume that there are two instances of registration microservices. These instances will register themselves with the Eureka server. Now, Book My Hotel web application is the Eureka client, and it will be having a background thread running at its end, which will get the registry from the Eureka server and store it in its local cache. Now, when it wants to connect to registration microservices, it will get all the instances from this registry, and load balancer of ribbon will be used to choose a registration service instance based on some algorithm, and then Book My Hotel web application will connect to that instance of the registration microservices. Now let's go to STS. Here I have 4 microservices: registration, search, hotel and booking. And there are no changes in the code of these microservices because none of my microservices is trying to connect to another microservices. But Book My Hotel web application is going to connect to all of these microservices. So ribbon specific configurations I will be doing in this web application. So first of all, in the pom.xml file of Book My Hotel web application, I have added this dependency, that is Spring Cloud Starter Netflix ribbon. Okay. So now after adding this dependency, let's go to my API service class. In this API service class, I have discovery client autowired, which I have shown you already in my previous video. Let's revisit that. I can get the instance, okay, using the discovery client dot get instances, and I will pass the service name to get the instances. I get the list of all the service instances, and what I have done over here is I have just picked up the first instance and got its URI and returned that URI. So I'm not looking into all the service instances. I'm not doing any load balancing. I'm just picking up the first instance and returning the URI. But now I want to do some load balancing. So one way of doing it is using the load balancer client. Okay, I have auto-wired load balancer client, and then I can write a method where load balancer client dot choose is used to choose a particular instance of the service based on the service name that is passed to the load balancer client's method. Okay, so this choose method will use some algorithm to use some algorithm to choose a specific instance and then return that specific instance. Okay, so I have the chosen service instance, and then I will use get URI method to get the URI of this service instance and return this URI. So this is one of the way I can do the load balancing. But in this case, I am writing the code for doing the load balancing, and I don't want to do this low level coding. So is there some other way which I can use? Yes. When I'm using ribbon, what all I have to do is I can go to my main application where REST template configuration is done, and I will just specify the load balanced annotation over here. So what will happen when I specify this annotation? There is going to be an interceptor behind the scenes for this REST template, which will do some pre-processing before REST template actually sends a call to the REST API. So what is there in that pre-processing logic? The pre-processing logic will be having this code of using load balancer client dot choose to choose a specific instance of the service. Okay, so now if I go down, this is the method that I am going to use. Okay, only thing I need to do is I need to specify base URI as http colon slash slash plus, and that is concatenated it with the service name. So if my service name is registration dash service, so my base URI is http colon colon slash registration dash service. And if I go to one of my services, which is the subclass of this class, let's go to search API service, which you have already seen. Here I have used this get instance method to get my base URI, and I am using the same logic as before. Here my REST template is already auto-wired. A load balanced REST template is auto-wired, and this REST template is used to call my REST API. So it will internally do the load balancing, pick up an instance, and whatever instance it picks up, it is going to make a REST API call to that instance. Okay, so I have done three things. The first one is adding the dependency, ribbon dependency in my Book My Hotel web application. Then I have added this load balanced annotation to my REST template configuration. Then in the API service, I have created my base URI, and then I just used it as before. Nothing more than that. Okay, so now I already have my Eureka server running. Let's create two instances of registration service. So as of now, there is one instance. If I want to create one more instance in STS, I will just click on this. I will right click, and then I will click on duplicate config. So two instances are created. But now if I go to my registration service in the application.yaml, I can see that the port of the server is 9001. So now both the instances will run on 9001 port, and it will create a port conflict. So what will I do is I will click on one of the instances and I will click on open config, and here in the arguments I will specify dash dash server dot port equal to 9018. Okay, so I have specified some other port. I will apply, and I will also change the name of the instance. Let's say I make the name, I set the name to be instance 2. I apply it, and then I close it. So now I have two instances of registration microservices, and let me start both these instances. Okay, so I'm starting the first instance and I'm starting the second instance. As of now, I'm not starting any of the microservices. So all other functionality will not work. I will just show you the load balancing using the registration microservices. And now I'm starting my Book My Hotel web application also. Okay, so now let's wait for a few moments and it will start. So it is starting now. And here there is a green arrow. So all of the required services and the application is started. So now let's go to the Internet Explorer, and this is my login page. Okay, so now I will first log in using the registration ID CR1. Okay, then I will log out and I will log in using the registration ID CR2. Okay, so once I have logged in using CR1 and another time I have logged in using CR2. So now let's go to STS, and here I can see that both of my instances are there on the one instance only. Both of the logins are in the first instance only. Let me try a few more. Okay, so let me do few more logins. And I will do it again. Okay, I will do again. I will do again. Let me do a few more. I will try again. Now let's go back. So here you can see on instance 2, there are 3 logins. And let's go to instance 1. Here you will see 5 logins. Okay, so some of the logins are going to instance 1 and some of the login calls are going to instance 2. Okay, so there is a load balancing going on with some of the instance calls in instance 1 and some of the instance calls in instance 2. Okay, so now let's look into a few more concepts. In the application YAML file of Book My Hotel web application, I have configured the ribbon configuration. So for the registration service, this is the ribbon configuration, and for the search service, this is the configuration. So I can keep different ribbon configuration for my microservices. So now let's understand these configurations. So let's go to the PPT, and here I will explain you. I have already shown you that we will create a URL something like this, http registration service. This is my service name with any path added to it depending upon my REST API. Okay, and then I will use the REST template as before. In the application YAML, this is the configuration I have done for registration service. This is the configuration I am doing because what if one of the instance is not available? Okay, so I need to do the retries. My application need to do retry to the second instance or the third instance. So I have done this configuration for the purpose of retries. So let's assume that Book My Hotel web application has 3 instances of registration services. So now let's look into the connect timeout configuration, which is 1 second. This tells you that Book My Hotel web application tries to connect to one of the instances, and if within 1 second it is unable to connect to that instance, it will fail, and then it will try to connect to another instance because the connection failed in 1 second. My connection timeout is 1 second. Now let's look into max auto retries 2. This tells you that for a single instance, my web application will retry twice. So if it fails for the first time it tries to connect, it will retry again. There are max auto retries as 2. Okay. Now there is another configuration, max auto retries next server, which is configured as 3. So let's look into this scenario and understand it. So Book My Hotel web application will connect to first instance, but there is a failure in connecting to that instance. So right now, how many retries are available to connect to next server? 3 retries are here. So it tries to connect to instance 2. Let's say it also fails. So now how many retries are remaining? 2 retries are remaining. So now it will try to connect to instance 3. Okay, this also fails. So now how many retries are pending? 1. So it will try to connect to instance 1 again, and it also fails. So now how many retries are pending? 0. So now it will not retry again, and there is going to be a failure. Okay, so now let's look into another configuration, read timeout, which is set as 3 seconds. So we cannot keep on going retries and retries and retries. So there is a time limit set. Okay, 3 seconds. So either the read timeout is over or the retries are over. If any one of them gets over first, if the limit of any one of them is reached first, then there will be no more retries. Okay, and If I want this to work, these retries to work, I need to add one more dependency in my form.xml file, and that is Spring retry. Okay, and this will work if Spring retry dependency is added. In case you won't add this, the load balancing logic will still work, but retries won't work. Okay, so here in this video, we have understood how to use ribbon for load balancing. Okay, so in the next video, we will look into field. Thank you.